So I've already sort of gone over what a chemical reaction network is, and that you can interpret them deterministically or stochastically. So let's sort of jump right into a model. So this is the same model I've shown you guys many times, where I have some signal which binds to a transcription factor, which becomes active, which then activates a gene, which binds to a polymerase, which is transcribed, which binds to a ribosome and is translated. And so I'm going to compile this model, or actually a simplified version of this model in BioCRNpyler. And so here's some code to do that. And you'll note that I'm using a simple TXTL dilution mixer. So I'm not actually including ribosomes and polymerases in this model. And the reason for that is in stochastic simulation, stiffness really slows down the simulation. And by stiffness, I mean if one reaction happens much faster than another, you'll spend all of your time simulating those really fast reactions and never simulate the slower reactions. So the binding and unbinding of a ribosome to a transcript, for example, is much faster than the rate of translation. And this means that in a stochastic simulation, if I had that binding reaction, I would spend a lot of my computation power binding and unbinding the ribosome before any translation event occurs. And that really slows everything down. I didn't want these simulations to take a super long time. So I decided to simplify the model and not include machinery. And the only binding and unbinding I have here is due to this chemical complex where two S's of the signal molecule binds to the inactive transcription factor. And just to remind you, I put that into a regulated promoter where this F1 complex species is my regulator, which is then the promoter in a DNA assembly, which produces a transcript T and a protein X. And I put all of these components into a mixture. Note, I also have an assembly here, a little different from what I showed you, producing F, this F assembly. So if I want to simulate this, I set an initial condition. And I can simulate this deterministically. And this deterministic simulation came up with some warnings, but it worked out in the end. And this is very easy. I just say, no, stochastic is false here to get a deterministic simulation. If I want a stochastic simulation, I toggle stochastic equals true to simulate stochastically. So right here, you'll see that I just changed one little keyword, stochastic true, and I get a set of stochastic results, which are still a pandas dictionary and look exactly like my deterministic results, except that they'll be the output of a stochastic simulation. So it's very easy using Bioscrape to do stochastic simulation using the same model. And here's what these results might look like. So I've set my copy number of the activatable gene to 1, so you see a lot of stochasticity. And you'll see that there's a huge difference. Even though I have thousands of protein counts, stochastic simulations look very different from the deterministic simulations. My deterministic simulation, they all go up together for a while, but then my deterministic simulation starts going down. Well, some of my stochastic simulations go down very early, and other ones continue for a long time before they reach 0. And this is really highlighting one of the key differences between stochastic simulation and deterministic simulation. And that's called an extinction event, when certain species go to 0. So here, what's really happening is that my signal, S, is disappearing. And when S disappears completely, it can't activate the transcription factor. And so I can't produce any more protein. And then suddenly my gene turns off. And that happens at some random time. Because S is bound to a transcription factor, which is then bound to a gene, that unbinding process is very random, and it could happen very quickly or very slowly. And so my total depletion, when my last of my S molecules disappear, is a very highly random event, giving rise to this huge fluctuations in my stochastic behavior, which are not seen in my deterministic behavior. And this is something you see often where really stochasticity occurs at the very lowest of copy numbers. And we can see that by just changing the copy number G naught equals 10, and stochasticity is dramatically reduced. Here, I'm sticking close to my deterministic simulation for much, much longer. And if I simulate it out farther, eventually I might see some larger stochastic events, or maybe not. Just by having more genes and therefore more regulation or sequestering of these S species in a more consistent way, and therefore more consistent dilution of S, I'm getting less stochasticity. So, you do these stochastic simulations and you say, oh, these are really noisy trajectories. How am I going to make sense of them? And in general, the methodology is as follows. I use PySimulate model with stochastic equals true to generate a trajectory. And I want to think of each of these trajectories as an experiment. And just like in biology, you need multiple experiments to say anything because things are noisy. You can't just look at one experiment, you want to look at many. And in effect, what you do is you collect statistics about your trajectories. We'll start by talking about how you collect steady state statistics. Often you're interested in what the steady state is of a CRN. This is sort of the long-term average behavior, not looking at dynamics. And so on the left here, you see the simulation results, deterministic with the dotted line and one stochastic trajectory. It really matters how I average over this trajectory to get the right steady state value. So in the middle, I'm showing you the fraction of the final simulation I used. If I'm over here, I've used all of my simulation, while if I'm over here, I've used almost none of it. And you get different results. So if I use the beginning of my simulation to calculate steady state, I'm actually including non-steady state dynamics. So right here, everything's changing for the first, 1 to 2 hours. So I probably don't want to include that if I'm looking at steady state dynamics. On the other hand, if I use just the very end of my simulation, I'm going to really just look at maybe one of these bumps, and I'm getting a short, noisy trajectory, and I'm really measuring the fluctuations in that trajectory might override the actual average behavior. So you might say that there's sort of 3 regimes. A first regime where I'm using too much of my simulation and I'm including non-steady state behavior. A middle regime where I'm using most of my trajectory and getting good statistics. And a final regime where I'm not using enough of my trajectory and I'm actually really measuring fluctuations. And I think the best way to see that is if you look at the standard deviation of a species. You'll notice that my standard deviation goes down initially and then flattens. If my standard deviation seems flat like this is a sign that I'm in sort of the accurate regime where my fluctuations seem pretty consistent. However, then my standard deviation starts going down again. And this says that I'm using too little of my simulation, and because I'm really just looking at short-term correlations in my simulation. So there's a sweet spot, and that the amount of initial simulation to cut off and how much final simulation I need really depends upon your system. So it's helpful to make plots sort of like these to try to understand what's going on and know that you're collecting valid statistics. And to give you an idea of the code to use to collect these statistics, well, it's very simple. I define some burn-in. This is a number of time points I want to discard at the beginning. And I calculate the mean using numpy.mean of my results, and I calculate the standard deviation using numpy.std, where I start after my burn-in time. So I just truncate my vector, which makes it very simple to do this. And the previous code you saw was just me making a loop through burn-in times to give some different, to fill up those graphs. Now, if I want to calculate time-dependent statistics, I probably need to use multiple trajectories. And what I mean by that is instead of taking one trajectory and averaging over time, I'm now going to take many trajectories and average at every single time point. And so here you can see examples from 30 trajectories in blue, 15 trajectories in turquoise, and 3 trajectories in yellow. And what you'll see is that there's diminishing gains. As I go from 15 to 30 trajectories, I don't see a big change. But 3 trajectories is definitely not enough. This yellow line is really messy. Or another way is if I zoom into the steady state, you can see that my steady state distributions and standard deviations from 15 and 30 trajectories when averaged over time look very similar. But the case when I only have 3 distributions is actually really different. And you'll notice that the yellow lines are sort of every which way. So choosing the right number of trajectories to get correct statistics is challenging. And again, you have to do experiments and try to look at the statistics and see when they seem to be converging. And it will depend upon your system. And the code to calculate these types of statistics is really pretty easy. I'm going to run some number of simulations in a loop. I put them into my samples, and then I can just use numpy.mean along the 0th axis. So this is along my samples, but not along time, or same with the standard deviation. Prompt 1, if you want some practice with just stochastic simulation, is to look at a bistable toggle model, which I've given in this notebook that's online. And how does it change when you use it stochastically? And in particular, you'll notice that the standard deviation statistics and mean are not really the right thing to think about for this model. What you want to think about are correlations, and that's worth investigating. And another thing that I will lead people through if you want to learn about partitioning is how to use Bioscrape lineages to add partitioning effects to a CRN. And this is sort of a teaser for what that looks like. Here, what you're seeing is each of these lines is a single cell that then divides into 2 more cells and divides again and again. And each cell has a volume in these dotted lines. And so you're really here simulating an ensemble of growing and dividing cells that has a toggle switch inside of it. And here what you're seeing, the value is the absolute value of A minus B, and the color says there's more A or more B. So if it's purple, it means I have a similar number of A and B molecules. I'm in sort of, the 2 repressors are A and B. And if I'm red, I have more B, and if I'm blue, I have more A. So you can see that we have 2 subpopulations of cells here. Some are red and some are blue, and there's maybe a 3rd subpopulation that's purple, that are all existing simultaneously in this ensemble of stochastic CRNs that are growing and dividing.